Blysak, and I'm an illustrator and designer with a focus in concept art. I recently graduated from the Savannah College of Art and Design with a BFA in illustration, a concentration in concept art for animation and video games, and a minor in architectural history. My work is very inspired by storytelling. I love folklore and mythology, and I also take inspiration from a lot of modern influences like music, video games, drag, and fashion. My work has a lot of color and a lot of whimsy to it, and I really aim to take my viewers on a fantastical journey through a new reality that isn't quite as detached from their own as they think that it is. And I'm so excited to share with you all today some things about me, my work, and my process. So my studio name is Bonebox Illustration, and I get asked a lot, where did that come from? What does that mean? It comes from when I was reading Beowulf in 9th grade, and we were talking about Old English versus Modern English. And the Old English phrase for coffin, ban coffin, literally translates to, in modern English, bone box. And I just thought that is fun to say. It's a little bit spooky, it's a little bit silly, it's a little bit sexy, and I think all of that kind of encompasses my work. So for about as long as I've been seriously drawing, I've been bone box illustration. Something that's a big part of my work is organic storytelling. So taking nothing and building it into a full story and creating work that kind of just builds on itself, and the first step informs the next step, informs the next step. And the project that I've chosen to kind of exemplify how I do this is the culmination of my concept art class. We had 10 weeks and very little prompt to create a full concept book for, like an animated series or a video game, or, whatever we wanted to make, we could make. And we had very little outside prompting. Basically, we were told, you need environments, characters, and you need a story. Okay, go. So I'm gonna show y'all how I went from, all right, let's go, to a full finished concept. So for the first 2 weeks, we focused on environments, and this was when my professor introduced the idea of abstracts to us. Abstracts are a very organic way to get to a concept. So basically, we were instructed to scribble and use different brushes and different textures, just scribble. And those scribbles would start to inform our concepts. And, from the scribbles, you're going to come up with something that maybe you wouldn't have thought of originally. And working forward with this, I chose to scribble both digitally and traditionally. I really love automatic drawing. I think it's a fun way to come up with things that you wouldn't, otherwise do yourself. So, playing with ink splotches and, like blowing watercolor around a piece of paper with a straw. And all of these things that just create these very organic, automatic shapes that you can then build from. And it's a really fun way to get into being creative. So the environments that I came up with out of these abstracts all had some kind of shared elements. And those shared elements are how I started to string the story together. The first environment is kind of like this broken up architectural mess of, floating buildings. And then the second one follows that same architectural theme with the buildings floated and just tied down to the earth by these little cables, and the moon became kind of a prominent thing, and I kind of settled into my color palette with these really nice pinks. I love the color pink. I use it a lot in my work. And these things kind of started to float around together in my brain. It's like, how do I link this all together? And then I had the ships that were, starting to explore these floating islands, It's how did these islands get up there? In the final environment, I have the moon really large, you're very close to it, like it has to be affecting this somehow. And that's how I came to the very simple conclusion. There is one way for this all to happen. The moon is evil. Or something on the moon is evil, you know? The moon is bad, and the moon is doing this. How? I found that out through my characters. Character creation is probably my favorite part of the art that I create. It's my favorite thing to do, so this part of the process was really joyful for me. I again started with abstracts, so, 80 little scribbles of just shapes and trying to piece together the kind of character that I wanted to fit into this dreamy, apocalyptic, but some people don't know it's apocalyptic, this kind of loose fantasy world, and a lot of my influences definitely came through in these character designs. There's a lot of stuff that's kind of Final Fantasy-esque. There's a little bit of like Sailor Moon influence, because of course the moon became a huge thing in this. And it all came together to create 4 characters that informed the 2 kind of camps that I had set up, the people on the planet and the people on the moon. So the first character I created is the ruler of the planet. The planet is a theocratic society. It's ruled by a high priestess. Her name is Maria Aurelia. And she believes that this apocalyptic event that's happening is a good thing because her people are being raised into the sky closer to the divine light of the moon, the light that she believes brings life to the planet and makes the seasons change and, really informs their way of life. So she views all of this as a good thing, and she wants to figure out ways to make her people, be able to live in the sky closer to the light of the moon. For the influence of this character, I had a lot of Greco-Roman influence. She's really heavily influenced by images of the Oracle of Delphi, because that's one of the most powerful women in Greek society. So she has, the 2 urns that are filled with smoke that, project visions to her. She has all of this heavy drapery, and then her crown is, it has a little crescent moon that comes over and covers her eye, and it also has these radiant beams coming off of it because, sometimes you just can't get away from the influences that you have when you were younger. I was raised Catholic, and of course I love a big halo, so that definitely came through here with this character. The second character from the planet is one of the heaven explorers. So the High Priestess creates a corps of explorers to go out and see this new world that's unfolding, to go out into the sky and see what opportunity lies out there, what great advancements can be made as we move into the heavens. So for this character, I wanted them to appear to be very naive, very hopeful, very full of light and happiness, not knowing that this is an apocalyptic event, that their people are dying, that they're going into the upper atmosphere, and they could all die up there. So this character is very, fluffy, and I chose pink because that's such a happy color, and also because I love the color pink. And I just wanted them to feel light, cute, not understanding the situation, and to have hope, because I think that that's a very important thing to infuse into stories, especially ones that become apocalyptic, like this one is. So the next 2 characters that I designed are characters from the moon. Of course, every story needs a villain, every story needs a catalyst, and this next character is the reason that all of this is happening. So her name is Madame Miranda Lunara. She lives on the moon, and she owns a nightclub up there. It's called the Nightclub. It's spelled with a K, so it's, K in parentheses and then nightclub. Very cool. And she lives on the moon, and she is so tired of the people of the planet worshiping the moon, because there's no god on the moon. There are just, these space elves that live on the moon, and they want to go about their lives in peace. She is so tired of her phone ringing off the hook, and they're like, "Hey, great light of the moon, please bless us with crops. Please do this for us. Please make it rain. Please make my child get better. She's tired of it. She doesn't want to hear it anymore. So what is the best way to get people to stop calling you? It's not to block their number. It's to turn off the gravity on the planet and start to make them rise into the atmosphere where they will all burn up, lose access to cell service, and die. So that's her plan. She is committing a mass genocide, and, you know, she's evil and she doesn't care. It means that her phone's gonna stop ringing, and you know what? When you're evil, you go to extremes. Her influences are very drag. I was definitely inspired by the Boulet brothers. They're two drag artists that I really enjoy, and they do a lot of horror, glamour, you know, camp, filth, this really just high femme horror, and that's what I wanted for this character. Her boa, her like fluffy thing around her shoulders, is made from the feathers of the hats of the Heaven Explorers, and they're a fur trim on their coats, and when she kills them, she takes them, she dyes them green, and she turns them into the little accents on her outfit. Why? Because she's evil. The final character that I made is probably my favorite one. She also comes from the moon. Her name is Bunny Lunara, and she strongly disagrees with what the Space Witch is doing. She's not for it. She too would like some peace and quiet, but she thinks that there are better ways to go about getting your phone to stop ringing than committing mass murder, you know? So she works at the nightclub, and she's like, hey, yo, boss, I don't agree with this. And you know what? Her boss is like, that's dumb. And you do agree with this, because her boss is what? Her boss is evil. So she thinks to herself, you know what? Dental is nice, and so is vision and mental health care and all these nice things that my insurance gives me, but I just can't stand by and let people die all because I like my insurance. So she leaves the nightclub and she embarks down to the planet to find survivors and try and figure out how to stop this event from happening. And this character, I wanted her to be very cute, kind of naive, and I wanted her to have a sense of hope to her, you know, that things can get better. So she's kind of the where the game starts character. She links up with the Heaven Explorer, and the game is their adventure to stop the end of the world and to come to a peaceful solution. The last part of this project was to put everything together. So to knit together the characters and the story and make these final concept pieces that really brought everything all together, tied it up in a cute little bow, and said, this is our story, this is what is going on, and this is kind of the game and the world that you're going to be playing in. So for my first two scenes, I chose to do scenes on the planet that kind of informed the planet's view of the events that are happening. So it's a creation of the Heaven Explorer Corps, where the Heaven Explorer meets with the High Priestess for the first time, and she explains to them all of the opportunity that is to be had from this exploration of the atmosphere, from this embarking into the great light of the moon, you know, all of this goodness and joy that can come to the people. And she blesses the fleet of ships that then sail off into the sky to explore, to find opportunity, and to eventually all die. The third environment that I have is where Bunny leaves the nightclub, where she says, you know what, I don't agree with this. I don't think what you're doing is right, and I'm going to go and help these people. And her boss is like, you know what, fine. You no longer have health insurance. Have fun out there. And she leaves, and she goes off, and she finds the Heaven Explorer. The Heaven Explorer has lost their ship. They're one of the last few that are still alive, and she's just floating in the atmosphere, kind of waiting for death to take her. and then Bunny finds her, and there's a new sense of hope for the planet, that they can get together and figure this out, that they can save their way of life, that they can come to a peaceful solution, and that everyone can kind of live together, and that there can be new opportunity for this, that the false hope that they had at the beginning of the story doesn't have to be the way that the story ends. And this is kind of where the game would start, and you would start to play through this adventure of finding a solution and putting the planet back together and defeating the evil space witch, because everybody loves a good boss fight. And that is how I went from nothing to a full concept book. So for this next section of the video, I want to share some of my more full illustration work. This differs from my concept work, where I have a lot more time to do sketches and to really nail down the concept. So I start every piece with sketches. This piece was based on a horror environment. I chose to do a haunted hospital. And I think the really easy way to go to make hospitals scary is to do, you know, like, there are evil doctors and zombies chasing you, and they have bloody knives, and it's all blood, guts, and gore, and like, ew, very, like, gross, bloody horror. And I wanted to do something a lot more sterile. So I based this piece off of chemotherapy. Both my mother and my grandfather went through chemotherapy as part of their cancer treatments. And it's a medicine that attacks the body, you know, it attacks living cells. So it kills the cancer, but it also kills anything else that grows. And the side effects are really horrific. And I wanted to use all of that to create this horror piece. So the first step with these sketches is to find kind of the composition. I ended up going with something that looked like a greeting card because, one, my mom got a lot of greeting cards during her time with chemotherapy. A lot of, you know, get well soon, a lot of my condolences, you know, a lot of people expressing their feelings through these greeting cards. And two, with the greeting card theme, I could kind of close off the environment and make this very cluttered, closed off, there's no way in or out type of situation that I think would just make the piece feel even more horrific. So after I have all the sketches done, I'll move into working out the composition and all the elements I want to put into it. In this stage, I kind of just draw and redraw the piece until I'm really happy with how everything is put together. And, you know, I think that it has the right kind of feeling for the story that I wanted to convey. I wanted, you know, the skeleton to be like trapped in this environment, and the nurse is evil and pumping the skeleton full of these drugs that have like withered him away completely, and now he's just trapped there forever, pumped full of poison. So that was the feeling that I wanted to do, and I kind of just draw and redraw, and I'll go in at the start with a very thick brush and kind of just blast it all out, and as I keep going through this step, I'll move into a thinner brush until finally I have the line work that I want. I've drawn it up the way that I want. The way that I kind of approached drawing this piece, I did everything kind of like piece by piece. I didn't want the perspective to work well together. I wanted it to feel kind of like really messy, really jumbled, extremely claustrophobic. And I think I hit that really well. After I do all of that drawing and redrawing, I will move into colors. I always go with flat color first, and I kind of did not know how I wanted to attack this piece at the first part of it. I went in with like a green background, and then I just started going on top of that, and each color choice kind of informs the next one. And after I have all the flats done, I will go in with overlays, transparent layers. I'll start to kind of work up the shading and how I want the light to be. And then after that, I'll go in with full layers that go over the entire piece that will affect all of the colors and kind of unify the palette together, because I wanted it to be very muted, very, the life sucked out of it, kind of creepy, glowing, haunted, you know, very spooky. After I have the colors worked out, I will go in and I will start coloring the line work. I feel like this really ties everything together, kind of brings it out of feeling kind of comic-esque and more into an editorial landscape. So coloring the line work really brings everything together, really marries everything, and kind of takes a lot more of the focus off of the line work and into the just piece as a whole. So that is the full process, and now I'm gonna just take some time to talk about all the elements that I was able to pack into this piece. The frame is based off of the peace lily that my family received after my grandfather died. And then the cat on the skeleton's lap, my mom, her cat was with her the entire time. Her cat would not leave her alone. You know, we called her, she's a little nurse cat, and she was just always there. So she had to be a part of this piece. The skeleton wears big earrings because after my mom lost her hair, the nurse told her, you have to start wearing big earrings. And she told me this nurse wore purple mascara. So there's a lot of purple in this piece, and the skeleton wears big earrings because that was a big part of what I remember her experience to be. The seashells in the background are there because my grandfather did a lot of arts and crafts with seashells. That was kind of his big hobby that I always remember him doing. And then the clock reads 3:17. That's the day that he passed. And so this piece has just a lot of elements that bring not only a sense of clutter and horror to it, but also a lot of personal story. And I think that's one of the reasons why I really love this piece and I really enjoyed making it. The final piece of my work that I'd like to share is one of my portraits. Portraits are something that I really truly love doing. My portraiture style is informed not only by my early influences, but also a lot by my schooling. So the portrait that I've chosen to share is one of the musical artist FKA Twigs. She came out with a new album this year, Capri Songs, that I really loved. And I love drawing musicians because I feel like they are artists that just speak a different language than I do. You know, their language is music and my language is visual art. And kind of playing translator between those two medias, I think, is so much fun, and it's such an enjoyable process to try and figure out, you know, how do I represent this person to be in line with their music? I chose the elements in this piece based off of her astrological signs, which she mentions very heavily in the album. You know, she's a Sagittarius moon, a Pisces Venus, and a Capricorn sun, and she uses that astrological theme as part of her album. She also mentions it a lot. So the first part of my portraiture process is I will pull reference and I'll kind of just sketch directly on top of the reference because I don't want to be bogged down by trying to find the likeness. I don't want that to be the biggest part of figuring out the portrait. I want the biggest part of figuring out the portrait to be where I'm going to place all of these fantastical elements to really make it its own thing, divorced from the original reference photos. So I just kind of go in and trace right on top of it. It also is a matter of speed. You know, I think that when you are making art and you have deadlines, you need to be able to do things quickly. And you need to be able to feel okay doing things quickly, you know? After I have the sketch drawn up, I'll start to just go in with my line work. I really love starting with the eyes. I feel like that really informs who the person is and kind of the vibe that they have. You know, I chose to put stars in her eyes and to make them really big and kind of like cute, dreamy, and that informs not only the character but also the kind of musical vibe that she has. You know, she's like an ethereal pop girly, and that is what I wanted to do. Then after I kind of have the face nailed out, I go into my favorite part, which is the hair. I love drawing hair. I think it's so fun, all the patterns that it can create and all of these just kind of organic swooping motions. The way that I draw hair is really heavily influenced by comics and manga. I grew up reading a lot of manga from Clamp. They're an all-female manga studio, and they're, you know, best known for like Tsubasa and Holic and Cardcaptor Sakura. And I love that in their work they use a lot of pattern. It's all like a lot of stark black and white. It's not a ton of tones. And I think that using line work is a really fun way to get that stark black and white with not a lot of shading, and you have all of this detail, but it's just two values. And I think that's really cool, and I look to emulate that in my work. And then another artist that really influenced kind of the way that I draw hair and kind of got me started on this so many lines, just pack it in, is Trunkles. He's an American illustrator, and just the way that he draws hair is like, it's like mounds of like spaghetti noodles. And I thought that was really cool, the way that he just went through and drew every single piece of hair, and everything could have this rhythm and design quality to it that I think drawing hair is like textured masses. You just can't get it that way. So that's why I take all the time that I do to draw out each individual piece of hair and the movement that they go through. And then further going through the portrait, I take a lot of time to texture out elements to make sure that there are not only these really thick blocks of line work that you can focus in on, but also these breaks, so the horns have a lot less density to them. And then finally, the fish have the least amount of density to them. After I've finished with the line work, I go in with the color. When I do this style of line work, I like to do kind of flat airbrushy color. So I'll go in very flat with my base tones, and then I'll add kind of highlight and shadow, but I don't want any of it to take away from the line work. I want that to be the main focus. So I'll go in, and again, I'm just making choices with color. When I do portraits, there's a lot more like planning, uniformity to go into it, because, you know, of course I'm trying to make this look like the person. You know, I want their skin tone to be their skin tone. I want their eye color to more or less be their eye color. If they're wearing makeup, I kind of want it to look like it does in the photo, or at least to look natural on their skin tone. So portraits have a lot less color play than some of my other work, but I do still like to make it very fun. After I've gone in and I've colored the portrait most of the way, I will start to color the line work. And this step is hard, but it's also very enjoyable, because I have to figure out a way to leave my line work alone and let it speak for itself, but also to kind of marry it into the piece and make it all fit together into one cohesive unit. So this process is a lot of trial and error, a lot of, you know, I'm so glad that Control-Z exists. But at the end, I got something that I was really happy with. And then the last thing that I do is I go in and I do a final color overlay to kind of really add to that dreaminess of the portrait. And that is how I make my portraits.